All right, whenever you're ready, Min, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Claire. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the webinar. As Claire has indicated, I'm a professor of criminology and criminal justice at the University of Maryland. And today's topic for the webinar is the National Crime Victimization Survey, or the NCVS. I plan to talk for about 20 minutes, which should leave some time for discussion. The topic I will cover includes some background information, such as what is the NCVS. I'll talk about NCVS methodology, including the data structure and how you can access the data. I will discuss the most recent NCVS redesign, including the research opportunities that it creates. I hope to provide information on useful resources that you can use to learn more about the NCVS. So as many of you know that the NCVS is the world's largest and longest running victimization survey. The survey and the UCR's FBI and the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program are the two primary sources of data on crime in the US. The NCVS sample is designed to represent the US civilian household population. So it excludes those under age 12, those living in institutions, and those who are homeless. As you can see from this table, the size of the NCVS sample is large, based on the number of households and persons interviewed each year. The response rate of the survey was traditionally very high. Although in more recent years, the survey response rates, just like in any other federal surveys, have declined over time, even though the response rate is still very respectful. But this makes it a very important research area. And for the research that has been conducted shows that the NCVS and the UCR data supplement each other. Both data sets are very important and neither is replaceable. And obviously, for the NCVS to collect such large amount of data, the survey requires institutional and research support. The Bureau of Justice Statistics, BJS, and the Census Bureau are the two most important agencies for the development of the survey. And there are many other agencies and organizations have contributed in different ways to the success of the survey. For example, the Office on Violence Against Women in the U.S. Department of Justice and the National Center for Education Statistics have supported some of the NCVS supplements. Other organizations like the NORC, WestAd, and RTI have contributed in different ways to the development of the survey, including some early development in the 1960s, and also the two main redesigns of the survey, one in 1992 and one in 2024. And I really would like to recommend three National Academy of Sciences reports for those of you who want to learn more about the history and the development of the NCVS. One report was published in 1976, another in 2008, and one more recent in 2014. And these detailed the history and development, and either you are experienced researcher or novice users, you can learn quite a lot about the survey methodology. Here I would like to provide a list of, I think, are important conclusions or insights that we have gained from years of research. I call them the foundational insights we have obtained. Evidence shows that many crimes, more than 50%, are not reported to the police. The research indicates that victims could remember incidents that occurred to them, and they're willing to report to interviewers even when some of the crimes were not reported to the police. And obviously, the reporting to survey interviewers may vary based on the type of crime, and therefore, survey techniques can be developed to facilitate the recall and reduce false or mistaken reporting. Overall, I think it's important to emphasize that survey methodology, the research on optimal field and survey design is essential for producing data that are of high quality and are useful to policy makers. And therefore, I would like to recommend two sets of readings. One was a chapter in the 1976 report Surveying Crime, which talked about the early development of the survey in the 60s. And then another is a research paper written by David Cantor and published in 2025 that detailed the development of the NCVS from 1972 to 2023. And these two reports thoroughly describes the survey methodology, and if you want to learn more. And so now let's take a look at the NCVS data structure. And these are hierarchical data, meaning that they involve multiple levels. The data collection begins at the address level. So the Census Bureau randomly selects a sample of addresses across the nation to represent the target population. The household that resides in the sampled address will be interviewed for the first time via face-to-face interviews. And then once selected, the address will stay in the sample for 3 years, and the household will be interviewed at 6-month interval for a maximum of 7 interviews. As these logos in this graph shows, these subsequent interviews will primarily be conducted by phone, although in some cases, face-to-face interviews can be used if these households don't have phones. People cannot be reached by phone or when they prefer face-to-face interview. Those household members aged 12 and older are eligible for interviews. The NCVS would measure both violent and property crimes in the form of rape, sexual assault, robbery, aggravated assault, simple assault, burglary, motor vehicle theft, and other household theft. So obviously, using the data that's available in the survey, researchers can study various types of crime, including intimate partner violence, hate crime, workplace violence, firearm violence, victimization among vulnerable populations, such as people with disabilities, meaning that you can use the data for lots and lots of research questions. And the hierarchical nature of the data is also reflected in the public use data you can download for free at ICPSR. For example, this is a data file that has NCVS data from 1992 to 2024. After you download the data, you unzip the file, you will see 3 folders, and they each correspond to different levels, one at household level, one person level, and one incident level file. And many research questions, as I indicated, can be addressed using the data. For example, one commonly asked question is, why don't people call the police? To answer this, you will use the incident level file, and the data will contain not only just the characteristics of the incident, it will also has information on the victim's personal and household characteristics. Another question could be, who has the higher risk of victimization for a particular type of crime? For this, you will use the person level data, and then you will append information on victimization you can obtain from the incident level file. You can also add household and community information. Another more complex question would be, you look at the police response to victimization, and then look at victims' decision to use non-police victim services, and then decide what works in reducing future intimate partner violence. The reason I say that this is a more complex question because it involves multi-level data and it involves longitudinal data. So the basic idea here is you can start with intimate partner violence victims. You track their interviews over time, and then you combine all the information you can get from the incident level file, person household level files, and some community characteristics to address the question. And this was a research question that my co-author, Dr. Jim Lynch, and I wrote and published in the Journal of Research in Crime and Delinquency. The research challenge we had when writing this paper was that because NCVS data are observational data, right? So the responses to crime, you can call them treatments, they were not random assignment. And therefore, we know victims have different probabilities of calling the police, getting the offender arrested, and using victim services. So to address that question, we used the observed characteristics in the NCVS to estimate persons' probability of receiving those treatments. You can call them propensity scores. And once you calculate those probabilities, you could use that information to match people based on the same probabilities, but some have received the treatment and some didn't, who are called controls. And as this graph demonstrated that once we matched people based on their probability of having arrests, you can see those who experienced arrests compared to those who didn't, they have similar path to re-victimization. This indicates that the arrests didn't show any significant impact on the likelihood of repeat intimate partner violence. And in contrast, when we matched people based on the same probability of receiving victim services, and then those who actually received showed lower risk of repeat intimate partner violence compared to those who did not receive victim services. So what I hope was that I have used that example to demonstrate NCVS data utility can be significantly increased when we try to use the multi-level data and the longitudinal panel data structure. Meanwhile, the BJS and the Census Bureau has used many other ways to increase the usability of the data. One method is to use NCVS supplements to add additional information about other types of crime, including identity theft, stalking, and school crimes, financial fraud, information on police public contact. And then another route is that in addition to publish national level rates of victimization, there are efforts to try to develop subnational and small area estimates. You can do this either using direct estimates or you can use model-based estimates. And if you're interested in the research, I'll be happy to recommend some readings for these types of research. And then another one I really would like to talk a little bit in greater detail is to link the NCVS data to external data sources using geocodes. And this is because there are lots of research interest in this area. When we think about geocodes in the NCVS, there are two types of geocodes. One is public use, another is restricted use, meaning that you have to get special permission. The public use geocodes in the NCVS data include the 4 census regions like Northeast, Midwest, West, and South. There's limited information about ecological conditions like the size of the place, whether this is public housing, gated community, and so on. If you use earlier data, like data in the 80s, you have information about small clusters of housing units called segments. I use that information to study crimes in those areas, how it affects residential mobility for my dissertation. And then finally, there are 2 metropolitan statistical area level data that are publicly available in ICPSR. And you can use that data to study crime and victimization in the largest US metropolitan areas. And then for those of you who are interested in the restricted use data, you can access the data at one of those 37 federal statistical research data centers across the country. The census website has information about how to access the data. I would like to provide an overview of the steps from my personal experience. Basically, you start by finding RDC, administrator that's near you. And then you want to contact the administrator to learn more about the application process, including things like, do I have to pay a fee, right? And once you decide that you want to develop a research project, you need to work with the administrator and work on a research proposal. In this proposal, you need to explain the benefits of your project to the Census Bureau. This is slightly different from other grant applications. That's why you need help. And once the project is approved, you need to do paperwork in order to obtain the special SWAN status. And then you do your research, you get the results, and then you need to complete disclosure avoidance reviews for the results to be released. So lots of steps, and that's why, hold on, let me make sure. That's why I call these are very lengthy process, but I consider them very high payoff research activities because you will be able to use the data to answer questions that's not possible with the public use data. And in my mind, they are best for more advanced researchers. And for logistic considerations, it's best if you live close to RDC, although you can apply for remote access, just require more paperwork. Researchers who are organized and who are willing to handle paperwork would be suitable for these types of work. One recommendation I have is you do have to anticipate delays. So when you are developing your proposal, build in more time to allow flexibility. And if you are a beginner, if you work under a strict deadline, my recommendation is to use public use data first, such as the metropolitan area level data, just to learn more about the data, make sure you can handle all the work. And then I wanted to briefly talk about the 2024 redesign. BGS website has the information. I recommend two research articles. One was written by Lynn Langton, Mike Planty, Jim Lynch, and published in 2017. And another was written by Jennifer Truman and Rachel Morgan and published in 2025. These two articles detailed the rationales behind the redesign and the steps taken, and also how much has been accomplished. Will tell you quite a lot about the redesign. But one way to think about this whole effort is that it's a major overhaul of the survey instruments. And the legacy or the traditional NCVS survey has multiple components. There is a household roster, and you can get lots of personal information from the survey. But the two most important components would be a one victimization screener and a detailed incident report. And then after the incident report, you can get additional information about these persons, including their disability status and citizenship status. What happened in this redesign is all these elements were thoroughly reviewed and redesigned to enhance the flow of the questions and to enhance recall. And you can get better measures of rape and sexual assault. Also, the survey has added vandalism. And then there is better information about the incidents, including the incident location, the presence of respondents in those incidents. And there is better measure about victim experiences, including their use of victim services, satisfaction with the police, and the consequences of victimization. But the most exciting aspect of the redesign is that they added two new modules, one on police performance and one on community safety. There's one report written by David Cantor and co-authors detailed the information for these two new modules. And I think when you think about new research opportunities, there are two types of research, right? One is the BGS and Census Bureau used a split sample to for the redesign, and you can one half of the sample use the legacy instrument, other use the new one. And you can use this data to do a lot of survey research about methodology and the implication on crime statistics in the US. And for those of you who are more interested in policy issues, substantive issues, the two new modules will tell you quite a lot of information about people's contact with the police. Some are initiated by residents, some are initiated by the police, and people's opinions about the police from the procedural justice point of view. And also, you can use the data to study fear of crime, neighborhood disorder, collective efficacy, including social control indicators and also neighborhood cohesion indicators. What this means is that now not only the survey is useful for people who experienced victimization, and even when you don't have any victimization, you can use the data to learn quite a lot about many important criminal justice issues. So this should increase the usability of the data. And so I want to say for the future of the NCVS, it's very important that we have continued government support for this important data infrastructure. And of course, the success of the NCVS depends on the use of the data by the research and policy communities, including members of the ASA. And then we have to keep pushing for data innovations for the survey to stay relevant and effective, especially given that the survey research environment continues to evolve. And for this, I would recommend a paper written by Jim Lynch, Jenna Lawrenson, and I for the 50th anniversary of the NCVS, in which we discussed the most important contributions of the NCVS from our point of view, and also what should be for the NCVS future. And I'd like to thank the ASA committee for hosting this webinar, and here's my contact information. I hope we have some time to discuss if you have any questions, and if I don't get to your question, please feel free to contact me and I'll do my best to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nim. This was a really interesting talk about, this survey that I've been really interested in for a long time, but hearing the both general overview of what it's covered and why it's important, but also some of the nitty-gritty details about how to actually start using this data has been really, really helpful. I wonder if folks...
Sharing? Sorry, do you want me to stop sharing?
Sure. Yeah, you could stop sharing. If folks have questions for Min, please do post them in the Q&A for the webinar, and I can go through our questions. I see one from Greg Ridgway right away. Could you discuss the timeliness or lack of timeliness of the NCVS data, or whether that matters?
Sorry, let me just make sure. You mean the lack of timeliness?
The timeliness or the lack of timeliness. I'm thinking probably, how up to date it is, how recently the data is published.
Okay, I guess one is BGS would regularly publish the reports using the NCVS data. So there's an annual report about crime victimization every year, right? So there is some lag in the sometimes there'll be some further delays. So now, for example, the 2024 data with the legacy data, the split sample of legacy data that's published at ICPSR for the redesigned data sets has not been released because I believe, I mean, you have to ask the BGS in terms of when they're going to release the data sets. But my understanding is they do have to evaluate the data before they can release the data sets. One of the design for the NCVS was trying to make sure the data are more timely. We have more timely crime statistics of the data in the US, but sometimes depends on the work schedule and BGS, how soon they can release the data. But from my point of view, like right now, this is 2025. I have legacy data from 2024. It's not terribly bad, and they could be better. And what I actually think the timeliness for me, the issue actually is I would think if possible is for BGS to put those restricted use data as soon as possible to the RDC website, because as I indicated in my slides, like right now you have the area restricted data only up to 2023, right? So there's some lag. And we're researchers, we're never satisfied. We want immediate data sets, but I also understand the BGS timeline. And there's some could be improved, but I think they're doing their best job, especially given how small the staff numbers are, like the number of people working for the BGS crime victimization unit. It's amazing they're doing so much. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask you, yeah, about the redesign and when it sounds like data might be available for that. It sounds like it's typically like a 2-year delay. Does that sound about right?
Well, like so the legacy data, which is the split sample using the legacy now, it's available in the ICPSR. But the newer data, I don't see a schedule. I think people have to contact the BGS to get more information. And the sooner they finish evaluating the data, then we'll be able to have. I assume they will release the data.
Great. Okay, so a couple more questions have come up. I'm going to go to one that says, can you talk a little more about the process of applying for access to the restricted use data? You had a slide on this, but Alex is specifically curious about how comprehensive is the required proposal?
Um, so the when I applied, because I assume, because the one thing about Census Bureau is their policies keeps changing in the sense is they keeps, because the Census Bureau's point of view is to maintain their promise to the residents of data confidentiality, right? And they also work with BGS to upload the restricted use data and the Census Bureau website. So the best way I suggest for people is to figure out of the 37 agencies which one you would like to work with, and then you contact them. Um, and when I did my application, I think the review process from the day I submitted, like I contact that person, and so she told me what to pay attention to, what to work. Then I worked out the proposal. That process takes several months to half a year, and then you submit the full proposal, like make the administrator think it's adequate. They will submit to the review panel, and the review panel would review your proposals and give you feedback. And so my estimate, I would be saying like fast, maybe 6 months. If it taken longer, could be a year. It's a process, requires a lot of back and forth and discussion. That's why I say, don't do this if you don't have time. You do this when you work on other things while you're working on this project, particularly for those of us how you are evaluated based on your research productivity.
So maybe in terms of how comprehensive the proposal might be, it sounds like maybe you can get some advice on that in early conversations with the RDC staff. Is that right?
Yes, they tell you because there are specific benefits to the Census Bureau, like some are Title 13 benefits, some are Title. So it's very different from other applications. The number of pages are not incredibly long, but it's just like you need to make sure you're talking to the Census Bureau rather than talking to like a typical grant proposal to other reviewers. Yeah,
Then if you have time, I might ask one or two more questions.
sure.
One is about the limitations of the local area-based data, and are there quantified differences among units? Specifically, they say due to reporting practices, or can we assume reporting is the same across states for this data?
The I think at the initial stages of NCVS development, that the reporting varies for different crime type, for example, right? So more serious types of crimes will be reported, less serious types of crime like simple assaults, based on the examination of reports victims have had with police records have indicated that even some of those incidents were reported to the police. Later, when victims are asked to recall, they may or may not report to the survey interviewers. That's why I'm saying the reporting would vary for various factors like crime type, like there are interviewer effects, and there is solid evidence about area characteristics. Like, for example, the percentage of immigrants in an area, where do you live, will have implications in terms of people's willingness to talk to the survey responders. I think I'm not naive to think that the reporting will be uniform across the country. However, I think the survey methodology is well documented, which allows you to examine to what degree some of the underreporting may be influenced by area characteristics. I think when those people, when they are producing the small area estimates, like the 22 states estimates using NCVS, or those, I would recommend people is to look at those published reports about either direct estimates and model-based estimates, and to understand what's the current methodology, and then incorporate your knowledge of potential areas, and then further see if any adjustments could change those estimates. That the best way really is to recognize, these could influence the reporting, and then you can probably, Census Bureau would appreciate you submit a proposal saying you want to study these area characteristics on reporting. That's one of the projects I'm doing, which is to look at the underreporting to the NCVS data based on area characteristics.
Great, and I think that ties in really well with the last question. So I'll just leave it as people were also curious about underreporting with demographic groups, but I think you really covered some really related topics. So just to be respectful of everyone's time, I think I'll wrap up. Just as a reminder, our next webinar is tentatively scheduled for February 18th. So we hope to see you there. More information will be posted on our website very soon. And otherwise, thank you again, Min, for your time. We really appreciate it. And we'll hopefully see everyone at a future webinar.
Thank you for everyone for participating. Okay. Bye.
Have a good day. Thanks, Min.